Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, January the 23rd, 2021. It is currently 10:57 a.m. Central Time. And once again, I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church, located here in Ovalo, Texas. Thank you so very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to either listen to me live. I saw that some people were listening to me live in the last live broadcast, so thank you so very much for tuning in. Don't know who you are or where you're listening, but thank you. For those who will not be listening to me live, well, shame on you. I don't know why you don't listen to me live. I really don't. I'm so hurt that you don't just sit there and wait until I'm live on the air. But if you don't listen to me live, thank you for however you may be listening, wherever you may be listening from, whether it's on YouTube. A lot of people listening to us on Pandora. Pandora the other day was number one. That was the number one place people were listening to us the other day was Pandora, which was really weird. It surpassed Spreaker. It surpassed Apple. It surpassed Spotify. It blew past everything. So when I was working to get us on Pandora, I was thinking, how successful is that going to be? But Pandora has turned out to be pretty good. So and of course, still SoundCloud, I still don't understand the numbers on SoundCloud. I will never understand the number on SoundCloud. I mean, we're talking 3,000 to 5,000 a day almost on SoundCloud. I don't even understand that. It's like in some cases, it's like maybe we should just have stayed on SoundCloud and not worried about anything else. But so thank you for those listening. The weird thing about the SoundCloud audience is they never respond. They never email me. They never speak to me. It is the weirdest. SoundCloud makes no sense. Now we haven't received any email from the Pandora listening crowd either. Actually, if you think about it, if we look at the number of emails I received, there are a number of platforms that account for no email traffic at all. No communication from a number of the platforms where people listen. And then we have other platforms where most of the people who communicate with me, that's how they listen. And so it's kind of interesting going, all right, here's the total number of downloads today. Here's the total number of emails. And those emails seem to come from people who are listening to me on these platforms. So what about the rest of the people? So it's always just hard trying to figure it out. But however you may be listening, whenever you may be listening, wherever you may be listening, just thank you. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you listening. And hopefully we are producing programs that you find to be helpful, beneficial, challenging, whatever words we want to use. But you know what it's time to do? Right here next to me, right here on this desk. Guess what I have here? The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Yes, we are continuing on. We are continuing on our detour, right? I know we're supposed to be studying the book of The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, but we are taking a detour. And I'm justifying my detour because I believe this detour really helps us understand what Thomas à Kempis is trying to say. Let's remind ourselves, Thomas à Kempis was a Catholic monk. Because he's a Catholic monk, there's times his Catholicism is coming through, even if you don't understand it or even if you don't see it. Now, whenever he takes a detour that's going in toward a way that's dealing with Catholic theology, one, we need to understand that so that we interpret the book correctly. Two, we need to understand that so that we can possibly reject it and say, well, we don't agree with that theological perspective because obviously I don't agree with everything in Catholicism or I'd be a Catholic, right? Obviously, I believe the Protestant Reformation happened for a reason, okay? So we could get into a whole discussion there. But look, if we want to understand the book correctly, we need to understand whenever he's possibly making a reference to something that comes from Catholic theology, we need to understand it. And two, we want to make sure we understand what he's trying to say so that we can decide if we want to agree or reject it. And I think it's important. If we're gonna work through a book, we need to do our best to understand the book in light of what we think the author actually meant. All right. So here we go. Let's pick up The Imitation of Christ. We're still in book 1. And if you remember, we are in chapter 19 of book 1 of The Imitation of Christ. And we are in the chapter that, in my translation, is entitled Exercises of a Religious Person. Now, immediately when we read that, we need to understand Catholicism here, a religious person, he most likely is referring to those who are a part of a monastery, part of a religious order, a Catholic religious order. They've given themselves, someone has dedicated their lives to a religious order. That's who he's referring to. We are taking it and trying to expand the principles to you and I as a religious person, not who's part of a religious order, but as Christians. What exercises does he believe needs to happen not only to the religious people within a religious order, but maybe to us as Christians? What can we learn from it? Well, we didn't get very far because as soon as we started reading the chapter, we read these words. The life of a good religious person ought to be mighty in all virtues. Stop right there. As soon as I read the word virtues, I was like, I bet you he has in mind at least the cardinal virtues as outlined within the Catholic faith. Or at least that's still my theory. I haven't been able to prove that yet, but I still believe that's what his Catholicism is coming through there. Hey, religious people within the monastery, you need to exercise yourself. In fact, let me read the exact words again. You ought to be mighty in all virtues. And remember, most likely these words, I think, were probably written for those within the monastery. Hey, everyone here, you need to be mighty in virtues, right? And the virtues I think he had in mind are the virtues as outlined in the Catholic Catechism, right? So let me pick up the Catholic Catechism. This is what we did. We started looking at the virtues, all right? In fact, this is page 443 of the Catholic Catechism. Paragraph 1805. Paragraph 1805, if you want to look it up online. I'm doing that just so that you hear that I'm holding the physical copy. All right. Page 443, and my physical copy of the Catholic Catechism is about to fall apart here. All right. Pages are about to start falling out. Here we go. This is paragraph 1805. This paragraph is entitled The Cardinal Virtues. 4 virtues, play a pivotal role and accordingly are called cardinal. All others are grouped around them. So I think he has to have in mind, hey, guys, here in the monastery, you need to be mighty in these virtues. And I think these would be at least 4 of the virtues they would have understood. And I think that we need to ask ourselves, are these virtues that is outlined in the Catholic Catechism, these virtues that are considered the 4 cardinal virtues in Catholicism, are these virtues that you and I, as non-Catholics, as people who believe in the Bible, are these biblical virtues? And if they are, have we as Protestants ignored these virtues? I will argue some of these virtues have not been given the time that I believe they deserve in study and in consideration sometimes within the Protestant world. So what are these 4 cardinal virtues? Here they are. Prudence, justice, fortitude. Those are the first 3. Prudence, justice, and fortitude, and we have studied those 3. Today we come to the 4th and final of the 4 cardinal virtues. All right, here we go. Temperance. Temperance. Today we are going to look at the virtue of temperance. What is the virtue of temperance? Is it a biblical virtue? Can you think of scriptures that speak of this virtue? I couldn't leave this into your hands to just finish the study, but I'm going to do at least part of it for you. All right, so here we go. Let's see what the Catholic Catechism has to say in regards to the virtue of temperance, and let's see if this is a virtue we need to spend more time thinking about. Are you ready? Here we go. This is paragraph 1809 in the Catholic Catechism. That's page 445, paragraph 1809. Temperance. Temperance is the moral virtue that moderates the attraction of pleasures and provides balance in the use of created goods. All right. Temperance, the way the Catholic Catechism, now they've got a whole paragraph here. We'll work through the whole paragraph, but let's just take this apart piece by piece and really try to understand this. According to the Catholic Catechism, temperance is a virtue, right? It is a moral virtue that moderates the attraction of pleasure and provides balance in the use of created goods. So we have created goods, and within these created goods, we have things that bring great pleasure, great joy. They may entertain us, and temperance comes along and says, no, listen. This moderates the attraction of pleasures. Here's these things that bring pleasures. Here's these created goods. Now we need to have moderation, and we need to be there needs to be moderation in our how attracted we are to these things. Because if not, we'll throw our entire selves into pleasure and into partaking and pursuing these created goods. Or we could think of this way. We can become so attracted to the creation that we begin to ignore the Creator. And they're saying temperance is the virtue that moderates this. Temperance is the virtue that brings balance. That's a very important word. Listen, it ensures, so the virtue of temperance ensures the will's mastery over instincts and keeps desires within the limits of what is honorable. All right. So they're saying temperance is this virtue that ensures the will's mastery over instincts and keeps desires within the limits of what is honorable. It limits, it controls, it provides balance. It gives mastery over these things so that you don't start doing things in a dishonorable way, but in that which is honorable. Let me continue. The temperate person directs the sensitive appetites towards what is good and maintains a healthy discretion. Do not follow your inclination and strength, walking according to the desires of your heart. All right. Now they're referring to an apocryphal book. They're referring to an apocryphal book there, so we don't have to take that as being God's word, obviously. It says, do not follow your inclination and strength, walking according to the desires of your heart. Temperance is often praised in the Old Testament. Do not follow your base desires, but restrain your appetites. Again, from an apocryphal book. They go on to say, in the New Testament, it is called moderation or sobriety. We ought to live sober, upright, and godly lives in this world. That's Titus 2:12. Titus 2:12. So I'm going to grab my Bible really quick. Titus 2:12. Titus chapter 2, verse 12. Here is where they believe temperance is taught here in the New Testament. Titus 2:12. So we'll go back to verse 11 because I think this is interesting. Titus 2:11. For the grace of God that bringeth salvation hath appeared to all men. So the grace of God, God's grace, teaches us that denying ungodliness and worldly lust, we should live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. I just think it's interesting because we talk about the virtue of temperance. We could almost make a biblical argument here, at least initially, that the virtue of temperance should be brought to us because of God's grace. We see the grace of God that brings salvation to us, and our response to that is temperance. Because then what do? We begin to deny ungodliness and worldly lust, and we begin to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. We begin to temper. There's a temperance that comes along that begins to deny ungodliness and worldly lust, and we begin to live soberly, righteously, and godly in this present world. Right? There's what they believe is kind of a biblical justification for it. It says, and then it has this. This is from Saint Augustine. They're going to quote Saint Augustine here. To live well is nothing other than to love God with all one's heart, with all one's soul, and with all one's efforts. From this, it comes about that love is kept whole and uncorrupted through temperance. No misfortune can disturb it, and this is fortitude. It obeys only God, and this is justice, and is careful in discerning things so as not to be surprised by deceit or trickery, and this is prudence. Now, that's interesting. He kind of brings a lot of the virtues together. St. Augustine did. Let me read a paragraph again. So to live well is nothing other than to love God with all of one's heart, with all of one's soul, and with all of one's efforts. That if we truly love God, what will flow from a love for God. This is what will flow from it. From our love from God, it comes about that love is kept whole and uncorrupted through temperance. That when we love God, then that love will be uncorrupted through temperance. If we don't have temperance, then that love is going to be corrupted and we won't love God. We're going to start turning that love to other things. No misfortune can disturb it, and this is fortitude. So fortitude will not allow any misfortune. Oh, well, man, my life got really messed up. Everything got really messed up. If we have fortitude, then it's not going to disturb our love for God. But if we don't have fortitude, as soon as everything goes wrong, then we're going to forget loving God because we're going to be upset and discouraged and depressed because things didn't go our way. All right. It obeys only God, and this is justice. To simply try to obey only God, that's where justice flows from, is from our obedience to God. And is careful in discerning things so as not to be surprised by deceit or trickery, and this is prudence. All right, so Augustine tries to bring them all together, but let's just focus on temperance for now. Temperance is the thing that keeps us balanced. This is always the struggle within the Christian life. This really is. And you know you've experienced this as a Christian, and you've probably had your ups and downs on this, all right? As a Christian, you know you live in the world. You're not supposed to be of it, but you definitely know you're in it, right? And guess what's around you in the world? You have pleasure, you have entertainment, you have created goods. You have all these things around you. And they scream at you for your attention. They're like, come here, come here, come here. Partake of us. Look over here. Enjoy us. Buy us. Come, look. And as a Christian, you always are fighting against, okay, how much can I engage in? What can I engage in? Well, clearly you can't engage in sin. That's obvious. But how much enjoyment can I find from the things of the world and entertainment and fun and just all the things of the world, and not actually be violating that you're supposed to be loving God? In other words, these other things actually become idols. They begin to dominate your love. They dominate your attention. Your passion becomes given to all of these things. And Christians have struggled with how to deal with this problem. And Christians have gone to extremes, right? You have Christians who say, that's it. No television, no entertainment. Your life is reading the Bible, studying the Bible. You don't engage in all of this frivolous, worldly activity. You can go back and read older Christians who are writing and preaching against going to the theater. You're not going to go to a theater and see a play because that's vain, meaningless, it's ungodly, it's a waste of time. You don't go to the theater. Now, we're not talking movies, we're talking about going to a play. Don't go to a play. It's ungodly, right? Because you've got better things to do. Christians have struggled with this. What can and can't you do? And you'll have different churches who take very different stances, right? Some are like, no entertainment. Don't have a television. And you'll have others who are like, no, you can have a television. Yes, you can go to a movie. Yes, you can read a novel. Yes, you can watch secular music. And others will say, they're worldly. Everyone's trying to figure this out. And what Thomas à Kempis is telling the people in the monastery is that, hey, we need the virtues. And one of those virtues is temperance. We have to have a balanced way of looking at it. And you could argue enjoying a monastery, where do they need temperance? But even there, they still need temperance. But you could argue that they already went into an unbalanced approach. You could argue that. But for you and I as a Christian, trying to figure out that balance, trying to figure that out, temperance is the virtue that supposedly we need to be able to try to figure it out. Like when can I do this? Well, is it wrong? Is it right? It's always trying to figure out, do we have the right balance? Do we have the right? Now, I'm not saying sin. Anything that's clearly condemned in Scripture is sin. End of story. We're talking about those things that are not specifically condemned in Scripture. Okay. The thing with temperance, I almost see temperance as a virtue that allows you the ability to be honest with yourself, right? Like, you have to have the ability to go, okay, come on. I clearly love this more than I love God. I clearly love this more than I love the scriptures. I think about this, spend more time with this, more passionate about this, spend more money on this. Sometimes you just got to be honest with yourself. I think we do a good job of covering ourselves and pretending that we have the right balance when we don't. We just got to be honest. And I struggle with this because I have things that bring me great pleasure and I have great passion for. All right? If you've listened to me for any length of time, you know two of them. Love professional wrestling, love the storytelling, love the characters, love the way they design a story. I love the way the story, when you watch a match, I love breaking down the parts of a match. You got you usually have 4 or 5 parts in a match, how each part tells a different part of the story. I like watching a match and going, okay, they just transitioned into the second part. I like breaking it all down. I love that. I do. And there's a lot of wrestling to be watched. And there's a lot of stories to be kept up with. And if I'm not careful, that I can become imbalanced. I love listening to music. Love listening to music, breaking down the way a song is constructed, or listening to this. Oh, this is new, keeping up with new music. I love music. I love movies. I can't say that I'm a movie fan. I think I'm a wrestling fan and a music fan far before a movie fan. But there's times I'll get into a movie kick, and when I get into movies, I love to analyze the movies. I love to break down what the message, doing film analysis, looking at how camera angles and how they use lighting to tell different parts of the story and how to interpret those stories. I love reading books. There's so many things I love. I'm one of those that, hey, we live in this world and there's so many wonderful things in this world that I don't understand how anyone could be bored for 1 second of one day. I've never experienced boredom because there's so much to partake of. And I try to find joy in every little thing. But the point is, if I'm not careful, those things, temperance tries to keep the moderation in check. It tries to say, whoa, be careful. Don't go too far. Oh, keep that in check. But it starts with an honesty. Now, sometimes what I have done to find balance is not doable for the average person, because what I have a tendency to do is say, okay, man, I spent a lot of time today doing this. I didn't spend enough time doing this. So then I'll just choose, I'm not going to sleep. I'll just stay up because that gives me my full 24 hours. Like, hey, I got 24 hours in a day. I'm going to use all 24 hours a day. Forget sleep. I'll forgo sleep so that I can then partake of all the things I want to partake and do so in a balanced and moderated way. I will just extend the day. While people go to sleep, I'm like, no, because if I go to sleep, my day ended in an unbalanced way. I'll stay up. Now I've extended that to a full 24 hours so I can balance out with that time that I'm awake doing these things. And now I've got a balanced approach. That's the way I sometimes have tried to fix it. Now you could say, well, that's not unbalanced either because you need sleep. But I think sleep is created by the mattress industrial complex to try to convince people that they need sleep so they'll buy beds. I think sleep was made up by the mattress industrial complex so that they could sell mattresses to people, convincing them that they need sleep. I believe it's all a conspiracy. Okay, I'm joking a little bit there, but not completely. But yeah, I think I just think you can do without it. I think sleep is optional. And if I can forgo sleep, there we go. Then I have more time in a day to do more things and do so in a balanced way. It doesn't always work out the way I want, but I'm just saying that temperance is a virtue that I think Christians all know. I think deep down, I think we all know that we have to moderate what we do, but I think we struggle in how to pull that off. I think people go to extremes all over the place and try to figure it out. And I don't think anyone has ever figured it out perfectly. But that's what temperance is trying to do. Let's do this. Let's look up temperance. Let's just look up the word temperance itself. We'll go to the Blue Letter Bible app. Let me pull that up here. The Blue Letter Bible app. If I do a search for temperance, give me 1 second. Temperance. We're going to find, and at least in the King James, it's used in 3 verses. It's used in Acts 24:25. All right. That one's really not a lot of help. Acts 24:25. Then it's used in two passages that I think are very important. The first one is Galatians 5. Galatians 5. Now, this is interesting. Galatians 5, let's look at verse 22. Galatians 5:22. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, long-suffering, gentleness, goodness, faith, meekness, temperance. Against such there is no law. One of the fruits of the Spirit is temperance. That's important. So let's do this. Let's go to Galatians 5:23. Let's go to Galatians 5:23. Let's pull up the word temperance, and let's see what the Greek word is here. The Greek word, here we go. The Greek word for temperance is this.
Strong's G 1466, ekrateia.
Now this is an interesting Greek word. It's used. The Strong's definition is self-control. There we go. Temperance. It's used 4 times. The Greek word is used 4 times. We'll look up all the times the Greek word used. The outline of biblical usage, self-control, the virtue of one who masters his desires and passions, especially his sensual appetite. In other words, his fleshly desire. See, temperance is the virtue that says, here's my fleshly desire. I can keep that in check, and then I can then pursue that which is spiritual, good, godly, holy, etc. The 4 places that it is used, it's used in Acts 24:25. Okay. All right. That's okay. So it is used. It's used 4 times in 3 verses. All right. So when I said 3 times, it's used in 3 verses, but it's used 4 times in those 3 verses. So the first one is Acts 24:25, which is not of much help. Next, Galatians 5:23, meekness, temperance, against there is no law. We looked at that. And then the third verse it's used 2 times. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 6. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 6. Let's look at it. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 1. 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 6. 2 Peter chapter 1. If we go back to verse 4, we'll get some context here. 2 Peter 1:4, whereby are given unto us exceeding great and precious promises, that by these you might be partakers of the divine nature, having escaped the corruption that is in the world through the lust. And beside this, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge, and to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience, and to patience godliness. So we need to add to knowledge temperance, and to temperance patience. So we don't just need knowledge, we need temperance added to that knowledge. All right, that's somewhat helpful. Same Greek word. In other words, what do we need with just knowing? We need this self-control. We got to develop this self-control. And supposedly this is a fruit of the Spirit. There should be some kind of control that begins to arise within us, seeming to be the biblical teaching. If we look up temperance in a Bible dictionary, we read this. This is the entry in the Nelson's New Illustrated Bible Dictionary. Temperance. Control over sensual desires. The meaning of the word temperate is in English translations. Okay, I'm going to read this again. Control over sensual desires. The meaning of the word temperate in English translations of the Bible should not be restricted to the kind of self-control a person exerts by abstaining from alcoholic beverages. The temperance of which the Bible speaks of is far more inclusive. It includes a self-control that masters all kinds of sensual desires, such as sexual desire or the desire for material comfort. Through temperance, Christians can discipline body and spirit so that they are more capable of striving for their spiritual reward. And interesting enough, they give 1 Corinthians chapter 9 as a text that seems to articulate how we develop this. 1 Corinthians chapter 9. Let's go to 1 Corinthians chapter 9. They want us to look at verse 24. Here we go. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24. Know ye not that they which run a race run all, but one receiveth the prize, so run that you may obtain. And every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. So this is an important passage. This is very important, because this passage kind of gives the idea of how we develop temperance, how temperate is used in a practical way. So let's think about this. The Bible seems to articulate that temperance is one of the fruits of the Spirit, right? So that it's something that should be being worked in us through the Spirit of God. But there seems to be also an aspect of being temperate and temperance that we have to develop ourselves. And Paul here in 1 Corinthians, uses illustrations from athletics, right? 1 Corinthians 9:24, know ye not that they that which run a race run all, but one receiveth the prize, so run that you may obtain. All right. Those who run a race, there are those who run, and there are those who run to win. Run to win. And if you're going to run to win, means you're going to do everything in your power to be prepared to do what's necessary to be the best runner you can be. That's going to be disciplining your body, training your body. It's going to be abstaining from certain things, anything that would hinder our ability to run. Verse 25, every man that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things. Anyone who wants to master something will be temperate in all things, because they know there are certain things they cannot do if they want to have mastery. Now they do it to obtain a corruptible crown. In the world of athletics, we see people who want to be the best, and they are temperate. I'm not going to eat this. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to do that. That could be harmful. That could be harmful. And I'm going to spend more time doing this, because they're trying to get a corruptible crown. But Christians who supposedly are going after an incorruptible crown, we don't seem to show even anything close to that kind of discipline. That discipline shows itself in being temperate, not just from alcohol, but from everything, from material comfort, being temperate where is the virtue of temperance in your life? Where is the virtue of temperance in my life? It's an interesting passage to just consider. And in verse 27, note how Paul, he just used this illustration about athletics and how the world competes for a corruptible crown. Now, Paul is like, hey, this is how I conduct myself to get the incorruptible crown. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. He fights against his, look at verse 26. I therefore so run, not as certainly, so fight I not as one that beateth the air. But he's like, I'm going to bring my body under subjection. I'm going to make my body submit. I'm going to force my body to submit. Temperance is a virtue that has to be developed by discipline. And it seems to be a biblical one. Now, how do we understand this? I think we can believe that it's a fruit of the Spirit, which the Bible indicates, but I don't believe it's just then all of a sudden you become temperate that way. I think it's a fruit that's there, but I think it has to be developed. You have to work on being temperate. You have to strive to be temperate. Are you a temperate person that demonstrates the virtue of temperance, or you are a person who is you don't understand balance? You don't understand balance in any way, shape, or form. Or you're balanced in some areas, but when it comes to the things of God, you don't even consider it in your balanced life. Temperance. I'm just sitting here. I'm just thinking about all the implications from this. I guess what I really want you to get from this, and again, what What Thomas à Kempis is saying is that all the people in a religious order needs to be mighty in this virtue. I think we need to be mighty in the virtue of temperance. It's a biblical virtue, again, but it's not thought about. It's not talked about a lot, but it is talked about in certain ways. But I think how it's talked about is everyone's attempt to try to figure out what the right approach is. Because I think what we have a tendency to do is, this is what I think we have a tendency to do. And I think this is where Christians get this idea wrong, and see if you agree. Our focus is on that behavior there. Let's say movies. Going to the movies is wrong. Watching movies is wrong. That is wrong. And because I've been in churches like this, right? Can't go to the movie theater. That is wrong. It's ungodly. They would say that the Bible condemns it, right? They would say it falls under the category of being worldly, whatever. They would say it falls under the category of being a bad testimony. You cannot go to the movie theater. Watching movies are bad, right? And for them, it was just the movie theater. But okay, many within that church would just like movies, just don't watch movies. But what I was always fascinated by is they would always replace, say, watching movies. They would always replace it with something else. For example, you couldn't watch movies, but man, you could watch 47 hours of football. You could watch college football all day Saturday, watch pro football on Sundays, watch pro football on Mondays. They didn't have Thursday night games back then, but now, hey, football's okay. So see, movies are bad, but if you just replace it with something else, that's not temperance. That's not temperance. Hey, I don't watch the movies. Look how godly I am. But I watch 37 hours of football a week. That's not temperance. You just replaced one thing with a different thing. All you've done is you said that's immoral. You said that's ungodly, and you just replaced the ungodly with something that you think is now not immoral and not ungodly, but then you become unbalanced in that. And so now this thing that's not ungodly, supposedly, this thing that's not immoral, all of a sudden now becomes an idol, becomes to dominate your life, and you're giving your fleshly desires for that kind of pleasure. You just replace one thing with a different thing, and you feel that you're better off because you don't engage in what you now labeled the bad thing. So this is what I've found Christians doing. The things that we don't do, that's the bad stuff. And the things that we do, that's the good stuff. And it used to drive me crazy because like when I was in that First Bible Institute, hey, you could go home and watch all the college football you want and you're godly. But if I went home and said, I'm not watching any football, I'm putting on headphones and listening to music. Well, the music you listen to is ungodly because it has an evil beat or it's secular. You can't do that. But wait, what about football is godly? And then I was told football's godly because it teaches important life lessons. And I'm like, well, music doesn't have important life lessons in its lyrics? What? What? So, but again, that's just the way you couldn't play cards. Playing cards was bad. Couldn't play cards. But you could play other games. You could play other board games. Cards were bad, but board games were fine. Well, if you replace one thing with another thing, now we're getting into an argument about which thing is godly. That's not the virtue of temperance. Temperance is balance. It's a moderating that fleshly desire so that your fleshly desires are not the thing that dominate your life, where all you're doing is trying to fulfill that fleshly desire. This is a virtue that I think we need to spend a lot of time thinking about, because I think we can convince ourselves that we're so temperate when in reality we are not. There you go. Those are the 4 cardinal virtues. Let me read them to you one more time just so that you know. We've looked at all of them now. The 4 virtues are called, are you ready? Here they are. These virtues are called cardinal virtues because all the other virtues basically come from them or are grouped around them. Here they are: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. Prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. And I would really challenge you, look up paragraph 1809 in the Catholic Catechism and read over and over and over that paragraph from Augustine. I think that's a very important paragraph. I may try to put it on the blog section of Theology Central, the pod page, theologycentral.net. I'll try to get this paragraph posted there on the pod page so that you can read it for yourself. There, so and you may want to just remember that, because it's just interesting. He brings all of the virtues together in that paragraph that Augustine did. I think that's yeah. I'm pausing because I'm looking at the next paragraph and I'm like, that's good, but we're already at, I won't go into it. Those are the 4 virtues. I want you to really think about those virtues, and I want you to just think of, can you think of a biblical example of someone demonstrating temperance? I would say that Solomon would be an example of someone who did not follow temperance. How many women did he have? How many concubines? How many wives? Right? And I think if you read Ecclesiastes, we see that Solomon found that pursuing all of these things and giving himself completely, whether it was alcohol, education, whatever, that it would not ultimately satisfy him. So the lack of balance there. In other words, fulfilling the fleshly desires gives you a temporary satisfaction, but not a long-lasting one. So that would be a lack of temperance. So yeah, I'm just thinking. Can we see this idea of temperance, this virtue of temperance, this correct balance, And I think we have a hard time being balanced in it. I think you have a lot of people who show no temperance. They don't even have the virtue of temperance, but they are convinced that they do because they say they're not engaging in ungodly activity. It's not just ungodly activity. It's in, like, sometimes when we think of, I need moderation from fleshly desires. Remember, you can be fulfilling fleshly desires and not doing anything that's inherently sinful. You just want to spend time hanging out with people, and you always want to hang out with friends, and you love family, and you want to do, and all of these things you're not being temperate in. They become an idol. They become your God. They become your passion. They dominate your life. That's a lack of temperance. But because it's not ungodly things, you pat yourself on the back about how godly you are. Temperance is about moderating those desires, those sensual, fleshly desires that may not be sinful. In other words, you may not be engaging in anything that's inherently or clearly condemned in Scripture, but those things are becoming to dominate your life. So now you don't love God with all your heart, body, and soul. You love these other things. I think that's an important point that we have to at least add to this in closing. I think that we'll leave it right there. There we have it. Now, the next time, we'll go back to chapter 19 of Thomas à Kempis, and then we'll work our way through the chapter. It's somewhat of a lengthy chapter compared to some of them, but we'll at least we know what I think he's referring to. And so he wants the life of a good religious person ought to be mighty in all virtues. Are you mighty in these virtues? Are you mighty in these virtues? And if you're not, what can you do to strengthen these virtues? All right, I'll stop right there. Email me, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Everyone have a wonderful, great Saturday. And, well, God bless you, and I look forward to hearing from you.